change the way you think. Now, how many of you guys have heard of Robert Kiyosaki? Is that a brand new marker? That was, wasn't it? There we go. Okay, you guys have probably all heard of Robert Kiyosaki. And how many of you guys have ever read the book, the CashFlow Quadrant? A couple of you. Okay, so actually 80% of them has not read that. Let me explain this to you. This was, if you want to write this down, read the book or listen to the audio. Audio is awesome. Of Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Okay, it's been a bestseller for, since it came out. Every year. It should be mandatory reading for anybody that wants to transition from what he teaches in his second book. Okay, in his first book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he basically is teaching about the mindset. This is real important, is your mindset will actually determine your success. A lot of times you'll learn skills, but you won't learn skills unless you have the mindset for it. And what happened is, Robert Kiyosaki talks with he's got his wealthy dad, who's his best friend's dad, and then he's got his real dad, who works in the school district, is a principal, and so on, and how his poor dad, basically, his real dad thinks, even though they're loving guys, both of them are loving men, but his wealthy dad thinks, who basically barely graduated high school, but he's loaded, he owns most of the property on Hawaii, and so on. So it's a fascinating book on the mindset of how a person needs to change their thinking to take it to the next level. So if you haven't read that, get that on audio. When you're driving home, listen to it. In his second book, this one really got me to think out of the box. He started talking about a thing that he called the CashFlow Quadrant. What he wanted to do is identify where people fit in these quadrants. And what the E stands for is employee. Okay, E stands for employee. S stands for self-employed. B stands for business owner, and I stands for investor. Okay? He said that 80% of the people, especially in America, at least 80 to 90, that's probably more like 90% these days, falls in the category of E and an S. Most people are trading dollars for hours for dollars, right? They have a linear income. They are stuck with how many hours they can work. Whether it's $100 an hour or $5 an hour, they are limited and they are capped on the amount of income that they can make, okay? Most people are conditioned from day one to be in that category of the employee. What happens a lot of times is people then get this entrepreneurial brain fart that goes off in their heads, that somebody says that they're good at something. Like if I came over and I cut your hair, okay, I actually cut my own hair, okay? But let's say for something, Mike, you called me up and said, hey, I need a haircut, and I'm like, yeah, I got clippers, and I clip your hair. And all of a sudden, I do it 3 or 4 times, and you say, guess what, Mike, that's a great haircut. You should open up a barber shop, right? Oh my gosh, I could open up my barber shop because I got the idea of being a business owner, right? I wanted to be a self-employed person, and I started my thing. What happens is a lot of people go from here to here, and this one crushes people. Typically, anybody who's self-employed, if they own a key to the facility, basically is just a glorified employee. Except it's 1,000 times worse. Because they went from answering to one job description of what you had to do hour by hour to now being the baker, the manager, the hair cutter, the cleaner-upper guy, the internet guy, all of these things that they've never had any teaching and so on. And why do you think the statistics show that 85% of all new businesses that start fail in the first 2 to 3 years? Right? Is because they fall into this category. What Robert Kiyosaki was teaching during that period was that he was trying to show people how they need to, as quickly as possible, if you want to create wealth and you want to live a lifestyle that most people only dream of, is you have got to figure out how to get from over here to over here as quickly as possible. Now, a business owner, a true business owner is somebody who has the ability to not show up for work and money still comes in. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm a big fan of that one. It's called a residual income, right? First time I was ever introduced to the concept of residual income was in my first networking opportunity. And I ran to my dad. My dad was going to be my first guy I was going to pitch, because dad's not going to turn you down, right? He's at least a loving dad, or maybe whatever. And I said, Dad, I'm fired up. I went to this thing. There's this thing called deregulation. And deregulation is great. Regulation, I get it, right? And I'm doing this. And there's this company, and they're offering residential income. And we can get rich. And he kind of looked at me square. He goes, you mean residual? I heard they got that too. I had never heard the word residual in my life. I was calling it residential income for a long time, okay, until he corrected me. Elvis money. You guys are in an industry, in a profession, in a space that allows you to create a residual income. Here's something to be encouraged by. If you create a nice residual income, you can eventually stop. Could you imagine? Could you imagine waking up when you were done sleeping? Not when the alarm clock goes off. Some of you caught that, right? You smiled. You're a little older. That's why you get it more than most people, right? Think about that. Most people wake up every single day because the alarm clock goes off. They have to be somewhere, right? I wake up when I'm done sleeping. Isn't that an amazing concept, right? You can only do that if you fall into the business category or the investor category. Now, the investor, I'm not going to go into that, but you guys get that from basically from what you do. Okay, investment is just people at work or money at work, okay? Now, so the basics is you're going to have to learn how to walk, talk, act, and more importantly, think like a business owner. You can't think the way you have been thinking, how you've been conditioned if you've been going through school and all of your family members have gone through life and not one of them is making any money. And I mean, I am in rooms of hundreds of people to thousands of people all the time, and I will ask in the room, how many people in the room here know people that work really, really hard? And everybody raises their hand. Of those same hands raised, how many people know those same people who work really, really hard are completely flat broke? And all the hands stay up every time. Because most of them are working hard, but they're not making any money because they're not working efficiently. Does that make sense?